Welcome to Make Lodging Great. My name is Vipul Dayal, and I'm your Director at Large here for AAHOA. It is my honor to introduce the moderator for this event. His name is Chirag Shah. He is the Vice President of our Government Affairs Division in AAHOA, and he also manages a brand new AAHOA DC office. So if you're ever in Washington, DC, go visit the AAHOA office. It's brand new. It's probably state-of-the-art. 601 New Jersey Avenue. There you go. It's also on our website, huh? Yeah, there you go. Just one second here. So, his team, and he has a great team, his team is responsible for advocacy efforts, whether it's federal level or state level or it's local level. So if you have any of those issues, make sure to get hold of Chirag and his team. He also serves on the AAHOA's executive leadership team. And he is the staff liaison for the Government Affairs Committee. So please give a warm AAHOA welcome to Chirag Shah.
Thank you, Vipul. Appreciate the warm introduction, and thank you all for coming and joining us today here at Make Lodging Great Again. We are excited about a lively discussion about some of the issues that are facing our country and our industry in particular. We had some wonderful speakers this morning who highlighted some of those topics, and we look forward to delving even deeper into those topics today with a distinguished panel of guests, including to my left, Alfredo Ortiz, who is the CEO of the Job Creators Network, which is a nonpartisan organization founded by entrepreneurs who believe the best defense against bad government policy is a well-informed public. Vanessa Sinders, who is the Senior Vice President and Department Head of Government Affairs for the American Hotel and Lodging Association. AAHOA is a singular voice representing every segment of the hotel industry, including major chains, independent hotels, management companies, REITs, beds and breakfasts, and industry partners, etc. Richard Constable, the Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Commercial Contracts for Wyndham Worldwide, and Rolf Lundberg, the Head of Public Policy and Vice President and Assistant General Counsel of Choice Hotels International. So please welcome our panelists. Our format today is going to be a rapid-fire discussion. We're going to talk about a variety of topics that are affecting us both in the public policy space in Washington, D.C., and in state capitals around the country, things that are affecting you, your business, your bottom line, and your families, for that matter, as well. And so I'm going to ask a series of questions to our panelists, and they'll respond on a variety of topics. And the first thing we'll discuss is one that you heard a great deal about this morning from Grover Norquist, the President and CEO of the Americans for Tax Reform, and that is the idea of tax reform as a generational change in the way that we have tax policy in this country. The tax code reaches all aspects of individual businesses, not to mention our personal lives. And there's been considerable discussion over the past several years about simplifying the tax code. They want to put it on the size of a postcard. And all of you all know the tax code is a rather gargantuan document. And as business owners, you'll have to navigate through that tax code in order to be able to comply. And so with the idea of reform on everybody's minds, we're going to open the discussion up a little bit about what that looks like for small businesses in particular, as well as hoteliers. And Alfredo, if you can please tell us a little bit of background on the idea of tax reform and the efforts, as well as what specifically JCN is focusing on in terms of small business and its impact on small business.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Chirag. Thank you, everybody, for coming here today. Just a quick show of hands, how many folks here believe we should pay more in taxes? Yeah, no, right, no. Exactly. One of the things that we actually did last year, we kicked off a Bring Small Business Back bus tour. We went about 30 different states, 17 states, 30 stops, talked to hundreds of small business owners. About 8 different governors were involved in that, and about half a dozen or so, 2 dozen congressmen. And one of the things that we talked about was taxation, and really how taxation is really hurting our small business owners. We were happy. Last year we had legislation that was introduced, that was reintroduced this year, called the Bring Small Business Back Tax Reform Act, H.R. 1425. And we really believe that if anything happens this year, it has to be focused on our small business owners. Look, we all would love to have a much broader corporate, comprehensive tax reform. I think we all would say that's a wonderful thing and a lofty goal. But if anybody has learned anything over the past few weeks, looking at what happened with the Affordable Health Care Act, or whatever that was actually called, it's not going to be easy. And making the lift for a comprehensive tax reform, I think, is not going to be an easy thing. In the meantime, small business owners like yourselves will continue suffering. And so one of the things that we continue to advocate is this reduction for small business owners. And I mentioned the Bring Small Business Back Tax Reform Act specifically. That one is an example. Chairman Brady, actually, House Ways and Means, has the tax bill part of the blueprint. But if you look at that, we believe there's actually even a better way than that, which is really helping our small business owners. For the first $150,000, for example, that gets tax rates to just about 12.5%, and then gets you up beyond that up to a 20%, which is pretty much where 25% where Brady is taking it. But we really believe if you look at that impact overall, especially in that initial stage, even up to that $150,000, that impacts in a positive way about 85% of small business owners. And we know right away that that is an investment that our small business owners across the country will push back into their businesses, not into their pockets. So we continue to advocate and push for small business tax reform. And again, while I think we all agree that a broader corporate comprehensive tax reform would be great, we believe something that's specifically geared towards our pass-through businesses, like almost probably many of you in this room are, we continue to advocate for that, and you'll continue to see Job Creators Network push for that.
Great, thank you, Alfredo. And Vanessa, from an industry perspective, what are some of the other areas of reform that you're watching, and how will impact the lodging industry?
Great, thanks, Chirag. So from AAHOA's perspective, because again, as Chirag mentioned, we represent the entire industry from the biggest chains to the smallest bed and breakfasts and properties. Our position on tax reform is more general. We are very supportive of Congress and the administration wanting to take on tax reform this year. We feel like it's important for business growth and development, and for you all to continue creating those jobs and growing your hotels and business investments. But because we have such a diverse membership, it's hard for us to hone in on there's just one specific tax piece or provision that would be the panacea for all hotels. And so instead, we remain a cheerleader for tax reform in general, working with folks like the Job Creator Network, AAHOA, the real estate groups, Chamber, all of those kind of larger business community groups on tax reform. One thing that you all probably have heard some talk about, one of the pay-fors in tax reform is this border tax proposal. And we have heard some concerns across the industry of some of the potential negative impacts of that border tax proposal. If you think about it, there's a likelihood or a possibility that that would make the dollar even stronger, which would potentially have a negative impact on international travel into the U.S., which, as you all know, is really important to our hotels. More international travelers means more people staying in our hotels. So just as an example of one of the many issues of tax reform that we are following, but again, we are kind of taking a higher level, more of a cheerleader for tax reform in general position.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm going to ask this as a segue, as a broader part of tax reform. It seems like, in addition to tax reform as a general idea for businesses, both large and small, one big component of that, or something that needs to happen, whether it's in tandem or very closely thereafter, is a change in our healthcare policy that the House Republicans sought to do for quite a while. For 7 years, they campaigned on it, and it came to a brink, and then they decided to pull it off the floor. Can you talk a little bit, Rolf, about the status of healthcare reform and how it intersects with tax reform as a larger entity?
Sure, Chirag. As Chirag mentioned, the order of major legislation in the Congress, working with the new administration, was supposed to be repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act with something called the American Health Care Act, followed seamlessly by tax reform. It didn't quite work out that way, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, when the leadership in the House of Representatives was unable to corral the conservative members of their party, the members of the Freedom Caucus, to support a repeal of health care, of the Affordable Care Act, that they thought was too expensive and did not provide the kind of long-term assurances to the American people of lower cost health care with lower premiums and lower deductibles. So they did not support the repeal and replacement of the ACA with the AHCA. And the Congress essentially went into a kind of limited meltdown. The Speaker Speaker Ryan managed to regroup and started to have small group discussions with some of his Freedom Caucus conservative Republican members, started to work again with the White House to perhaps restart the health care debate. But in the meantime, Congress is moving on to considering aspects of tax reform and how that should take place. Obviously, the problem with health care, as we've experienced it over the last 8 years, 7.5, 8 years, is that it's too expensive, it's too burdensome, particularly on small business. And there are aspects of the Affordable Care Act before last November's election, particular specific provisions of the Affordable Care Act that we were focused on, that we wanted to try to change and modify. For example, the redefinition of a work week from 40 hours to 30 hours. What that was doing, what that was in the process of doing, was turning our economy into a nation of 29-hour-a-week workers. And that is obviously not an intended or positive consequence of reforming health care. So those minor things we wanted to change with the election on November 8th and the opportunity to completely pull out and rewrite health care, we started to think much bigger. But clearly that's going to be a much longer enterprise than anticipated, not nearly as smooth. But those discussions are ongoing, and we'll have to see what comes out of the efforts in the Congress of the Speaker and his caucus to try to reach a negotiated bill that can get enough votes. There is some talk of bringing Congress back a little bit early from the recess that they just departed on a couple of days ago. I wouldn't hold my breath for that, but clearly healthcare reform is not dead. It is not even on life support. It's just entering a different phase. I think the right analogy on healthcare as well as tax reform is a baseball game. And we are simply in the first inning. We're finishing up the first inning perhaps and moving into the second inning, but it's going to be a very long game. And we have to be prepared for these major initiatives to take quite a bit longer than we had anticipated.
Rich, let me ask you, what are your thoughts as far as if you think one needs to happen first, whether it's healthcare reform or tax reform, and are you hearing from Wyndham owners that are concerned about either or both of these areas and how they play off of one another?
Yeah, from a sequencing perspective, I think it's important that healthcare happens before tax reform. And many of you that were there this morning with Grover Norquist, he talked about the fact that you need to have savings in order to have the tax reduction. So it's going to be important. I do believe that at some point this Congress, in the next 2 years, we will have health care reform in some way, shape, or form. It's a smarter way to go. But tax reform will happen. Every member of the Republican Congress campaigned on it, both in the House and the Senate. The president is pro-growth and pro-business, and it is going to happen. The Speaker of the House is in favor of it. What we don't know is, what are the rates going to look like? Will it go down from 7 to 3? Will it go down? Will individual tax rates go down, for varying levels? From a hotelier perspective, from an owner perspective, the individual tax rates are candidly more important than the corporate tax rates. Obviously, it's important to us, Wyndham, the corporate entity. But many of you own LLCs or partnerships, and the flow through is through your individual. So, we should all be rooting for lower individual tax rates, and I believe that that's going to happen.
Thank you. Now, we're going to move now to another subject that is affecting hoteliers in particular, but also small business owners across the country, and it deals with ADA drive-by lawsuits. How many of y'all are familiar with the idea of an ADA drive-by lawsuit or have been a victim of one of these lawsuits in your hotels? Heard of a family member or somebody else having these problems? Quite a few, it seems like. This has become an epidemic in our industry. It's a menace for hoteliers who've been targeted by unscrupulous attorneys, serial plaintiffs, looking to extort settlements under the guise of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Rolf, can you tell us a little bit about the latest on this issue and how it's impacted choice owners and what Congress can do about it?
Sure, absolutely.
Comment on what idiot thought of the law first? How did it come to play?
It is the product of the mind of some very creative trial lawyers. Every owner that I have spoken to has a story, either a personal story or knows somebody who has been the victim of one of these predatory drive-by lawsuits or demand letters. Every owner knows somebody who has actually paid to get out from under a demand letter. The ADA is a valuable 27-year-old law that serves a useful purpose, but as Chirag said, it has been hijacked as a vehicle to enrich the trial lawyers, and it has to be stopped. It has to be shut down, and the best way to do that is through some legislation that is currently in front of the Congress. It's been introduced a number of years in a row. The main sponsor is Representative Ted Poe from Texas, the 2nd District. The prospects for this bill are good. What it would do is it would require a particular notice to the owner and an opportunity to cure any alleged violation of the ADA. And it would also provide for a report, I think from the Judicial Conference, of alternative dispute resolution processes that could be used to avoid the litigation or the expensive and costly settlement processes that currently are plaguing owners. The bill is H.R. 620. It's going to be marked up in the Judiciary Committee sometime within the next month. The sponsors are now focused on getting Democratic support. There's plenty of Republican support. There's Republican sponsors to burn, but more Democrats are needed. So if any of you knows or is in the district of a Democrat who is on the Judiciary Committee, I would highly encourage you to speak to that member and say, look, this is a bill that would help us with an issue that is particularly painful and burdensome and harmful for small business. There are large trade associations that are in support of it right now. The Chamber, AHLA, of course, IFA, the Restaurant Association is much more engaged this year. But what's happening is the geographic scope of this abuse is spreading. The trial bar is going beyond the initial several states and becoming more aggressive geographically in the United States. The disability community right now is opposed to the bill because they do not want a single word of the ADA modified. But there may be some room for negotiation there or compromise. And if you talk to them, they will agree with you that this constitutes an abuse. The trial bar is abusing the Americans with Disability Act, and some compromise needs to be pursued. On the Senate side, there is also going to be a companion bill, but there's a possibility of getting Democrat on that bill, Senator Feinstein from California. Since those negotiations are ongoing, to try to get her support, there is not, as of yet, a Senate-introduced bill, but there will be one probably fairly soon. So this is an important issue. It is a drain on resources for hotel owners. It is an abuse of the legal system, and it has to stop, and we hope to be able to bring an end to it this year. And we'll be working very closely with AHLA and with Chirag and AAHOA to make that happen.
Thank you, Rolf.
They don't make any money off it. It's only the attorney. The trial.
It's just the trial bar that makes money. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I am a Republican, and I believe in our country, but there's only one reason that communism would be good, because the first thing they eliminate is all the attorneys.
I don't necessarily know that I would agree with that. I think there are a couple of us on this panel who wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but the sentiment is appreciated, so thank you for that.
I'm a lawyer, and you know what you call a bus going off a cliff with a couple of empty seats in the front row? A wasted opportunity. That's what...
Vanessa.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. Can you finish the question?
So is the move to have the process of making a decision on how to rule on it being pushed down into mediation and that type of settlement as opposed to court settlement?
So his question is that Rolf mentioned that alternative dispute resolution, in particular mediation, is being looked at in the bill as an option for resolving these disputes. Is that going to be an alternative to going to court?
Yeah, the bill calls for the Judicial Conference of the United States to develop a model program to do exactly what you just said, which is push some of these disputes down to a ADR, alternative dispute resolution mechanism. And it would also include cost-saving measures like stay of discovery during mediation, efforts to resolve claims regarding architectural barriers. The idea is to reduce the cost, establish the facts, and come up with, if necessary, a resolution that is appropriate and that fits whatever the violation might be, if there is one, rather than the sort of high-pressure demand situation that owners are put in right now, with trial lawyers coming by and submitting demand letters that insist on a certain cash payment right now in return for making the claim go away.
And I will add as well, courts are overwhelmed with cases of every stripe, right? And so by the time you get to these serial filers, there are times where judges will send them to mediation with the hopes that this will eliminate the need for court. But the trial lawyers that are involved in this right now are using that, in some ways, the overburdening of the courts as a weapon against hoteliers, knowing that they'll be forced to settle before they'll even get a chance to have their day in court. So,
sure.
Yep.
Just one of the things, too, that we're looking at at Job Creators Network is just broader tort reform conversations across business owners, because I think, the loser pays, I think, is something that we really need in this country. If you look across the world, we're one of the few countries that really doesn't have a loser pays model. And if you look at even the cost of the Affordable Care Act and the cost of medicine in this country, estimates are somewhere between 20 to 25% of that is due to frivolous lawsuits in defense of medicine. So
absolutely.
I think as a country, we should really be encouraging tort reform.
Absolutely. And Vanessa, let me ask you, President Trump has decidedly a background in hotels and theoretically would understand this issue. Do you think he could make finding a solution a priority?
Yeah, Chirag, I agree. I mean, I think that President Trump and his administration's focus on, being pro-business, lessening regulations, the concept of, he threw out there that for every new regulation you have to get rid of 2, while not exactly the same as this ADA drive-by lawsuit, it gets to the same issue that how can we make it easier for you all as small businesses and job creators in this country to do your jobs and to continue growing and providing that economic growth. And we're going to get into this a little bit later on how you can help but I would just emphasize a couple points that Rolf made. As he said, the House bill is introduced. It has a bunch of Republican co-sponsors, a few Democrats even. They're working on more Democrats. The Senate is where I think we need to put some focus to make sure the legislation gets introduced and that it is bipartisan. So those of you who are located in California, where Senator Feinstein is from, weighing in with her office is extremely important so that she knows the importance of this issue. Senator Flake from Arizona is the Republican who has championed this effort, and he is another good person for those of you from Arizona to weigh in with. And I just think that this year there is truly, as Rolf said, an opportunity to move this bill forward and pass it because of the makeup of the House and the Senate and who we have in the White House. And it's an example of the whole business community coming together, not just all of us at this table, but folks like the International Council for Shopping Centers, who knew that shopping centers were getting these lawsuits, but it has really attracted a wide coalition. And so we urge you all to get involved, and it will continue to be a priority for all of us, I think, over the next couple months.
Thank you. We're going to switch now to a topic that I know our four panelists are all have considerable expertise in, but frankly, you all as hoteliers, as employers, probably have more firsthand experience than anybody else out there as employers in particular, dealing with workforce issues. They're some of the most important subjects facing our industry on a daily basis. And labor and business have sometimes had a tenuous relationship, and there are those that would argue that for the past 8 years, the scale has been tipped in favor of labor. Rich, let me ask you, what are some of the most important labor-related issues that are facing the lodging industry, and what have you been hearing from Wyndham owners?
Well, you know, we have this this joint employer concern, and again, this was something that was brought up yesterday on the CEO panel, where several years ago the NLRB in their wisdom ruled that franchisors and franchisees are in essence inextricably linked. In a way that has not been done and overturned some 30 years of case law. And it's a famous case, the McDonald's case, and so if you're McDonald's corporate, you now could potentially be on the hook for something that the McDonald's down the street does incorrectly. Now, you may say to yourself, well, why should this matter to you as a franchisee? And there are things that we as a franchisor want to do to be helpful to franchisees, training, education, help with HR and the like, that literally the government is prohibiting us from doing, which puts additional funds and resources on you for something that as part of the royalties, you know, we should be doing for you. So, you know, and then we see challenges relating to what's it called, the rates for hour rates with
Overtime.
No, not overtime, but what is the rate that low?
The minimum wage.
Minimum wage, sorry. I was like, what is this rate? Yeah, it has been a while. Obviously, minimum wage rates, certain municipalities across the country are passing laws, and it's particularly problematic in the hotel space because many of these laws are hotel focused. So they're not just passing laws on minimum wage, focused, you know, on the entirety of the labor market, but they're honing in on us. And as many of you know, at times they're in bed with the labor union, admittedly in bed with the labor union. I think it's Los Angeles that passed a law that said that they'll raise the minimum wage for hoteliers. However, if you allow your workers to join the union, then the minimum wage is lower. I mean, this is crazy stuff. So you guys see it on the ground. We want to support you, but you obviously, you know, we're going to need your support, and that's why it's important, the advocacy and education that's being done both in state capitals and in Washington.
Thanks, Rich. Good.
Rich, just to add on that LA point, just for as all of you from AAHOA, HLA and AAHOA fought this LA hotel-only wage ordinance that the City Council pushed through. It was $15.37 an hour for only hotels and only hotels of a certain size. And then it included, as Rich mentioned, a waiver for those hotels with a collective bargaining agreement, so those unionized hotels. We fought that in the courts. Unfortunately, California and the Ninth Circuit was not our friend on this issue, but it was the first time that the industry had really come together on a labor issue and spoken with a unified voice, and I think it is indicative of what is going to come with the great partnership that HLA has with AAHOA, and really, if we're going to try to move the needle on some of these difficult labor challenges, we're going to need to do it together, and so it is a great example, and Rich kind of alluded to it, but from HLA's perspective, we just increasingly see local workforce ordinances that are hitting only hotels. Are any of you based in Washington or in Seattle or have heard about, there is an ordinance that passed there last year that wasn't about hotel-only wage, but it was about putting strict requirements for how much square footage housekeepers could clean in a shift. It included requirements about what type of health care as an employer you had to provide. It included a blacklisting provision so that if a hotel employee accused a guest of sexual harassment, that guest had to be blacklisted for a period of 5 years from the hotel, and there was no law enforcement involved. Hotels had to provide panic buttons for all housekeepers. So again, it's another example of where some of these workforce ordinances can be very challenging from a hotel perspective. And also, oh, by the way, it included the same collective bargaining agreement waiver. So HLA, AAHOA, a whole group of the local hoteliers have been very involved pushing back. We're in litigation on that too. But I think, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it more at the federal level, but while maybe the federal level looks like there's a more opportunity for us on the labor front, the local level is where I think we'll need to continue to focus some of our efforts.
Chirag, while we're beating up on Seattle.
Go ahead, Rolf.
There was another ordinance out of Seattle that in the minimum wage space that was aimed directly at franchising, at franchise businesses. Those of you who are from that corner of the country know that the Seattle City Council passed an ordinance that discriminated against franchise businesses, that imposed a $15 minimum wage on all business, but it said that any franchise business would be counted as part of the larger national system and would therefore have to raise the minimum wage faster, several years faster than every other business, which is on its face unfair and discriminatory. It was the subject of a lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed in federal district court, unfortunately in Seattle. Unfortunately, the federal district court found for the city. The case was appealed to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is not famous for its business-friendly posture, and found in favor of the lower court. So the case more or less ended there. But that does not mean that the practice ends there. In fact, the proponents of this kind of discrimination are emboldened by that kind of local ordinance or statute, and may be encouraged to find other jurisdictions where it would be relatively easy for them to impose this kind of increased cost on small business, particularly on franchise business, which would give the non-franchise business a distinct advantage for a period of time, at which point, at the end of the phase-in period, of course, everybody would be at the same level, but some of the businesses that had to incur those costs earlier on might not be around to enjoy that ultimate parity that business would have. And on its face, this kind of legislation is discriminatory and must be opposed. The unions you mentioned, Rich, are behind a lot of this. And I just want to say one thing on joint employer, Chirag, if I may.
Please.
You may wonder why on earth would the administration, why would the National Labor Relations Board push a theory and a ruling that would treat the franchisor and the franchisee as the co-employers of your employees, of the employees of the franchisee, the people who you hired. It's your business, but that's not the way the federal government views it. That's not the way the NLRB views it. The NLRB treats the franchisor and the franchisee as the co-employer or the joint employer of all of the employees who you hired. The reason, one major motivation for that finding is that it would be a huge boost to the labor unions. If you imagine the unions, what they face today, having to organize franchise businesses one by one by one. They have to go property by property, store by store, location by location, and negotiate with the owner with regards to that location. Imagine if they were able to bring to the table every single time, not just the owner of that location, but also the franchisor of that franchise system. That would give the unions instant access across McDonald's, across Subway, across Wyndham, across Choice, and every other franchised business in the country and every other franchise system. Instant access to thousands upon thousands, and when you aggregate them across the economy, millions of potential new dues-paying union members, something that the unions have had a very hard time recruiting over the last 3 decades. Their membership has been falling dramatically. The joint employer ruling is the holy grail for the labor unions. Labor unions are fine, but when they abuse the rules like this and try to use a single ruling to be able to organize an entire sector of the economy almost in one fell swoop, it's too much. And that's another reason for the ruling that is otherwise it doesn't make much sense whatsoever.
Thanks, Rolf. Alfredo, let me ask you this in particular. You know, one of JCN's greatest tools is your media and communications arm, and we've shown at AAHOA over 200 meetings, I think, the joint employer video and several of the other things, minimum wage, a variety of other things. How can employers have these conversations with their employees, and what are some of the strategies, in addition to some of the other issues on the labor front, that JCN has been working on?
Sure, yeah. Let me comment really quickly, though, on just kind of tagging onto that piece on the minimum wage part. It's a fight worth fighting, though, and I think it can be won. If anybody was following what was going on with Baltimore and what was happening in the city council, the minimum wage increase there, Mayor Pugh actually vetoed a city council increase that would have taken the wages up to $15. We actually actively got involved in that, gave the air cover to the mayor, and brought local business owners in there to really protest that. So it can be won, and it needs to be won. When you give a sense really quickly of how big of an issue this really is, everybody's heard of the fight for 15, and you saw I think it was last week or the previous week, stuff was going on there. This is 0.5% of all hourly workers are impacted in this minimum wage workers, so to speak, right? There are about 395,000 people out of 77.2 million hourly workers that fall into this category. So it's not to say that this isn't an important issue for those 395,000 people, it really is, but what we'd like to say is that there's really a skills gap issue, not a wage gap issue. And there are different ways of going about that and different pieces in the economy and different instruments that can be used, like the earned income tax credits, which we call the Working Americans credit, and stuff like that that can be used. So bottom line is, don't give up on this one, because it shouldn't be something that we give up on. And in the end, unfortunately, they are losing on this one. They've spent about $90 million on the fight for 15, the SEIU, and membership basically has not moved at all. Out of the 18 million, I think in this particular area, only about 1% are actually unionized. So yes, it's a holy grail. If they can get that numbers up, it's a huge number in terms of dollars and members. But in the end, this is a fight that they're truly losing on, but they are going to be using those local municipalities. So we urge people, if you know of things that go on, please reach out to Chirag so you can please let us know. We're not taking on this fight only at a federal level, but we are going to local municipalities as well.
Gotcha. We have about 5 minutes left here. I wanted to cover two more quick topics, then we'll hopefully have a time for a question or two. But Vanessa, this is to you. The creation of illegal hotels by the short-term rental industry has quickly become one of the biggest threats to the industry. Can you discuss how the industry is fighting back, how these groups have sort of decided to take on the fight, and what victories have been notched, particularly under the leadership of AAHOA?
Thanks, Chirag. So for us, I mean, this has been an emerging issue over the past couple of years, and I would say from our perspective, this is not about the occasional home or room rental, you know, the mom or pop, the grandma who's making a little extra money renting out a room in her home. That's been going on for decades. Previous to Airbnb or any of the online platforms, that's been happening. But what we increasingly hear about and where our concern lies is in what we would call commercial operators, those people mostly in big cities who are buying up condos, apartment buildings, multiples of those, and then renting them out just like one of your hotels, but not necessarily paying the taxes or abiding by all of the safety and security standards, health codes, fire codes, that even the smallest bed and breakfast has to abide by. And for us, it's an issue of a level playing field and the government not picking winners and losers. And it is by and large an issue that is playing out at the state and local level because that's where lodging laws are made. Many of you probably have seen some of these fights emerge in your city council or in your state legislature. I would say that hotels are one voice of many. The labor unions are involved from a worker perspective. There is a huge affordable housing component because if you think about it, in big cities, people are taking off that much needed affordable housing stock in cities like San Francisco and renting it out on a nightly transient basis, and that's having a detrimental impact on citizens and folks who really need that housing in those cities. Also, from a neighborhood perspective, I don't think that most of you or anyone who lives in a residential neighborhood thought that they were signing up for a revolving door of strangers next door to them, that oftentimes these short-term rentals can become more like party houses and whatnot. So there's a broad coalition that's been involved. There's been important victories notched in New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, where strong laws have been put on the books. HLA, along with AAHOA and the state lodging associations have been working with this coalition to put some rules on the books that level the playing field. If you're going to be a business, you should operate like a business. You should have to register. You should have to have a license. You should have to abide by these health and safety standards, pay your taxes, all of those things. We've also taken the position that this issue is going to look different in different communities. What's going to be right for New York City, which has a huge affordable housing issue and is probably going to be much more stringent on short-term rentals, is going to be different than what Myrtle Beach decides. And that's okay. This is about what is best for the community, and it's something that we've been involved in and will be continue to be involved in.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yes, I think the security component, that's a very good point, and something, just another element of why, you know, if you're renting on a short-term basis, that's why those rules are on the books for hotels, and if you're going to be a business, those rules should be on the books for you too, whether it's a short-term rental or a hotel or a bed and breakfast.
Even for a single house, you are trying to rent it out, they must be, you know, responsible for recording all that.
And yeah. You know, and it's on the security issue. That's a great segue to one of our last topics here. Rich, you know, human trafficking has become a growing problem in our country. It's led to tragedies and countless victims, their families. Recently, hoteliers have come under scrutiny for either ignoring the problem or, worse, profiting from it. What are your thoughts about this issue facing the lodging industry, and what are some of the thoughts about how this can be solved in cooperation with hoteliers?
Yeah, you know, this is a serious problem. Human trafficking is about a $150 billion industry here in the United States. And we're not just talking about sex trafficking and exploiting children, we're also talking about labor. You know, at times, primarily from South America and Central America, folks will come in illegally and they'll basically be held hostage. And it impacts us, both with sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Obviously, sex trafficking, there may be instances of children being held and made to, you know, have sex with men in our hotels. But also our, not us, but maybe some of our subcontractors are using, you know, illegal labor and then treating them in a manner that they shouldn't. It's important that we respond. There are good examples. Here in San Antonio a few years ago, a woman who worked at the front desk noticed, you know, a girl that, you know, was wearing makeup and the like, and men going in and out, and she contacted the FBI, and ultimately it ended a sex trafficking ring. But there are also bad examples. In Philadelphia, there was a girl in a similar situation at a local motel, and the motel basically looked the other way, ignored it, and profited from that. And now, so the question is, why should we care? So obviously from a moral standpoint, we should care, but also from a financial standpoint, we should care. In that example that I just told you about in Philadelphia, the girl is now suing the motel operator. And also in Pennsylvania, as a result of that, the legislators are looking to hold hotels and motels liable in instances of what the legal term is willful blindness, when you know something's going on but you're ignoring and you're profiting from it. And that's coming up in a number of states. So again, from a moral standpoint as well as from a fiscal standpoint, you know, we have to be vigilant. We at Wyndham and a number of other hoteliers have put together training programs to educate on the signs of this, and as well as when to report. And AAHOA has been also helpful to the industry in this regard.
Thank you, Rich. Yes.
For Airbnb, the same prostitution rings are now using Airbnb.
Right.
Heavily.
Right.
And also all of the criminal elements.
Right.
So that is a worthwhile to point it out.
Mm-hmm.
That means the customers come and go at the same time. That means the customers come and go.
Yes, yeah, I know. It's very easy for them to set in a very doing that.
Just to that point, you know, while the short-term rental issue is not something that is front and center in Congress, Congress has been very focused in the past on human trafficking, and we have actually raised that human trafficking issue in short-term rentals with members of Congress, and it's gotten their attention, and then it kind of clicks with them that, oh yeah, maybe there are some things that we need to do from a safety and security standpoint. So it's a really good point.
Mary Lou, you had a comment?
We use that exact point in New Jersey to introduce the regulatory component side of tax is that because it's very difficult when you tell a legislator, because I believe Huffington Post did a survey in 2015 that talked about the increase in using Airbnb for prostitution and trafficking. When you present that to them, it's really hard for a legislator to say, no, we don't want to do any kind of regulatory mandates on Airbnb because it's a huge public safety issue. So
That's a great point. Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's become a great weapon and talking point to get that test.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point.
Includes the drug trafficking also.
Right. No, absolutely.
This is here, you know, they have a whole house.
Right.
Can just go in and out.
Right. We've got one final moment here, and I'd like to ask each of our panelists, what can be done to elevate the voice of small business owners in the lodging industry with policymakers? And Alfredo, I'll start with you.
Yep, I'll be quick. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. AAHOA, AAHOA, IFA, CFA, Coalition Franchisee Associations, National Restaurant Association, they're actually all partners with us as well. So we're all working towards the same fight. I would quickly say, please help us to help you by joining joinjcn.com. It's a fight worth fighting. Like I said, we're not only handling things now at the federal level, but also taking to local municipalities. So anything that you can do to help us, again, we'll turn right around and help you, I'm sure. So.
And there's some literature in the back about the E2E program as well. Is that
Yeah, the employer-to-employee education program, like we said, the best way, the best defense against bad government policies, well-informed public.